Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today talking about this. Now this is the 1975 pattern Trials rucksack, and this is associated with the rest of the 1975 pattern equipment which we looked at on the channel previously. We have looked at this briefly in a previous video where I'd set up a set of kit to represent a soldier involved in the troop trials of the 1975 pattern equipment. I'll caveat here, I refer to it as 1975 pattern because the original documentation I've found which considers the 1975 pattern in comparison to the Mark II 1958 pattern made in nylon refers to the equipment as 1975 pattern. A lot of collectors refer to it as 1972 pattern because a lot of the components were manufactured in 1972. I believe 1975 is the date it would have been introduced had it been accepted, hence 1975 pattern. That's my understanding anyway. This rucksack has several features which would also be seen in the SES or parachutist's rucksack or Bergen, and the GS or General Service rucksack or Bergen, which you see later on. So from that point of view, something of a progenitor, and we'll talk about the various features now in some detail of course. We're also going to have a look at this laid out on the blanket on the ground and have a look at the bits and pieces we can't really see looking at it on the mannequin. But I'd like to look at this on the mannequin because it gives you an idea of the bulk of it, what it looks like when it's being carried. So we'll start off looking at the front of this, or the back of it as it's carried rather. And you have the main compartment here. For the time, not a bad size, but certainly by later standards, it's pretty small overall, this rucksack. The main compartment here, you have this lid, which has this shaped flap over the top of it. And this is secured with two straps, which don't buckle down to the front of this. There are two loops here, which these pass through, and then they're tied off in the center here. So you pull this down, tie it off. There are no buckles or anything. It's actually a very quick way of doing things. If you just pull this knot undone, you can just open it up very easily. So that's the main compartment there, and as I say, that closes with these two ties at the front. Below this we have a strap here with a cam buckle in common with other parts of the 1975 pattern equipment. This is a feature carried across to the rucksack. This cam buckle can be opened up, and this strap used to carry an entrenching tool, a shovel or a pick, down the back of the rucksack, and that simply rocks and locks the strap in position, as you can see there. The front compartment here also closes with two straps which tie through loops at the bottom here, so they tie together at the bottom. Again, not particularly voluminous, but you do have this large compartment on the rear here. The layout of the pockets is very similar to the Second War era Bergen rucksack in terms of the actual layout. The shape is different, of course. It doesn't come up sort of in a pear shape, I guess you could say, as the wartime rucksack does, but the layout of the pockets is similar. I'll also mention here, of course, this is made of a nylon material which has had a coating on it at some point that is beginning to wear off, and the straps and so forth are also made of nylon. A lot of the fixtures are made of plastic as well, as you'll see it as we look at this in more detail. We'll move on to look at the left-hand side of this now as it's worn, as you can see here. I'm not going to bother showing you the right-hand side. It's basically a mirror image of what we can see here. We will have a look at the front in a minute to have a look at the shoulder straps. But on the side here we have a side pouch, and the lid of this is formed in the same way as the flaps for the two, the main compartment and the compartment on the front here. So you have a row of stitching which you can see on the side here and on the side here, and that's the same on the side pouch, the lid of the side pouch. So you do get sort of a boxed lid over the top rather than just a flap. You can see this is closed by a fixture which is derived from US practice. So this is basically an adaptation of the closure used on the US M1967 equipment, the Linklow equipment, and then latterly the Alice equipment. So you have two prongs that pass through this section here, and when it's closed they splay out, and you can open this simply by pressing them in towards one another, and then you can lift this out of here. So it's derived from the US M1967 Linklow and Alice designs. This is stitched in place, so you have a row of stitching around the outside of this, and the same for the catch which is on the flap or the lid. The US version of this design uses plastic rivets, so just a slight modification to the way this actually attaches onto the equipment, and this is a common feature found on other components of the 1975 pattern equipment as well. That's the side pouch there. You can also see a side profile of the frame at the back here. It's a tubular metal frame which supports this rucksack, and you can see the shoulder straps coming over the shoulders here. And at the bottom here they loop through themselves, that this strap here loops back through a loop stitched into the end to secure it onto the frame, and in the process also secures a plastic D-ring here which holds the rucksack onto the frame as well, and we'll see more detail of that in a minute or two. That's the side profile. We'll have a look at the front now, have a look at the straps coming over the shoulders. So looking at the front of the mannequin here, you can see the shoulder straps coming over the shoulders of the mannequin. These are of a later design as used with the general service rucksack. I'm not sure if they are correct for use with the 1975 pattern. That is to say, I'm not sure if these were changed, whether the design was changed between the 1975 pattern rucksack and the GS rucksack, but they serve the purpose. I'd be interested if anyone can clarify that point in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear. It's not something I've been able to glean from looking at this equipment and trying to judge from photographs and so forth. I haven't seen another example of one of these rucksacks complete with shoulder straps in order to determine that. So these may well be incorrect. They may well be a later design. As I say, I don't know if the design changed prior to the introduction of the GS rucksack. So these are later shoulder straps. The way these function, they do work very well with the setup we have here. They're compatible with it. You have a padded section of nylon over the shoulders here, and then you actually have a separate strap here. This can be completely removed from the buckle. You have a metal friction buckle here, which the strap passes through to adjust it in. And at this end, it comes down to a stitched loop through which the strap is passed back through itself, and that loops it onto the frame and also through the D-ring on the rucksack itself. And we'll see how it attaches at the top when we look at it in a little bit more detail, which we're going to do now. So here we're going to have a look at the rucksack in a bit more detail, and you can probably see, looking at it here, just laid out on the ground, why I had it on the mannequin. It's a bit easier to see what's going on when it's on the mannequin, and then we can look at it here in a bit more detail. So looking at the front of this here, or the back as it's carried, of course, we have the main flap up here, and as I mentioned, you have these two straps or ties that pass through these loops here. So you pass one through each of these loops on the front here, nylon loops, and they just tie off together in the middle to secure the main flap. You can see the fitting here I mentioned with the cam buckle. We're carrying an entrenching tool down the back of the rucksack. Very simple way of doing things. Again, plastic fittings a common feature with the 1975 pattern equipment. And then down at the bottom here we have the lower compartment at the front. You can see no neck or anything in there, just an open compartment. And you have the two loops down here for those ties or straps to pass through and tie off in the middle. You can see you do have a drainage eyelet on that middle large centre pocket here, and the side pockets do also have those whilst we're looking at this angle of the rucksack. Moving on to the main compartment again, we open this up here. You can see there is a large nylon throat, made of a thinner nylon material, and this has a fixed lock slide which can be slid up to tighten off the draw cord and then locked in place. And this is found on quite a lot of 70s clothing and other bits and pieces. The draw cords, this one doesn't work particularly well, and some of them work a lot better. And the draw cord itself is made of nylon, and you can see this runs through little brass eyelets around the edge of this throat. I'll just loosen that off again. And then you have the main compartment of the rucksack here. Just one big open compartment in there. If I can shine the light in here, you'll be able to see. Looking at the side pockets in a bit more detail, you can see that closure I mentioned here, and you can see how that's stitched in place around the edge. And you can see that the sort of tongue part of it is also stitched in place. You can see that there. And we'll turn this right over now and have a look at the back, and I will take the frame out to have a more detailed look at this in a minute, but you can see the padding on the back of the rucksack here. It's a single hip pad in this instance attached to the frame, and the shoulder straps here. Now, I mentioned these buckles, these friction buckles, which are used to tighten in the shoulder straps. These lower sections attach through the frame and the D-ring, which you can see here. And there's a loop sewn into the end. You double it back through the loop, and it secures the strap to the frame and also loops through that D-ring to secure the bag of the rucksack to the frame as well. It's the same on both sides there, as you can see. As I say, these are later straps as used with the GS rucksack. I'm not entirely sure if a different type were used initially with the 1975 pattern. If anyone can clarify, I'd be interested to know. And at the top of the frame here, you have rings which pass through the nylon of the rucksack here where it slots over the frame. You can see that there. We'll talk a little bit more about these in just a moment. And then you have the plastic D-ring here, which goes over the top of that, and this clip on the shoulder strap just clips through both there, and that holds them in position, as you can see there. So what I'll do now is I'll take this off the frame. We'll have a quick look at the back of the rucksack off the frame, and then we'll have a look at the frame in a little bit more detail as well. We have the back of the rucksack here, and you can see how the D-rings attach on at each side here. These are made of an olive drab plastic, as you can see there. We have lower padded section across here, a padded section there. We have this strengthening made of this heavier duty nylon material, as you can see there, sort of woven herringbone nylon material. And then at the top here we have the sleeve that the top of the frame fits into, and the two slots there, which the loops on the top of the frame pass through, and the two plastic D-rings at the top there as well. We do have someone's name and number marked in on the little identity tag at the top here, which is sewn into a lot of British equipment at the time, a little section of white cloth onto which individuals' details could be written. And we do have that here, just for point of interest. So here we have the frame, and I've left the single lower pad in place here, the hip pad. Say hip pad, this actually is supposed to sit a little higher on the back than that, so this would sort of sit in the mid lower back rather than down on the hips if worn as intended. Not very comfortable to carry it that high up on the back, but that was the intention. This is one of the 1972 dated frames you'll find. These are a little shallower in terms of the curve on these tubes that run across the back of the frame compared to the later standard frames that we used with the GS rucksack. They have a bit more gap between these and the back for comfort. You can see there's a shelf at the bottom here which has two bars across, obviously the frame itself coming around, and then a bar welded on as well. And you can see the design of where the shoulder straps attach onto the side here, and sort of a side profile there of how shallow these bars passing across the back are. And then we can see here the two rings which pass through the nylon of the rucksack, and they're obviously clipped in place with the clips from the shoulder straps together with the D-rings on the rucksack. On later frames these are welded on sections of rod. On these earlier examples these are pressed out of sheet steel, as you can see. And we have a little plate at the top here which is a little difficult to show you, but you can see here ECH 72, and 72 is the date of course. Won't focus here, bring that into focus, there we go. And you can see the NATO stock number under there as well. So that's the little riveted plate on these. And I say they do turn up fairly frequently, these 1972 dated. I don't know why it's struggling to focus on that. There we go. These 1972 dated frames, obviously appropriate for use with the 1975 pattern rucksack. So I do hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, the 1975 pattern equipment, or the other elements that I have of it, have been considered elsewhere on the channel and worth looking at. The equipment is not a very good design, but it's an interesting design in the terms of development of load carrying equipment, as is the rucksack, as I say. So I do hope you have found it interesting looking at this overall design and obviously having a look at it in some detail. If you have found it interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below, and that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as I always say, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It really is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.